This is the dance party he attended and showed up.
Okay. This is a large, loud, raucous crowd, kind of crowds I like. Sounds to me like Reading is ready for a political revolution. Sounds to me like you want more than establishment politics, you want real change. You know, in many ways, what is happening here in Reading and what has happened over the last several decades is kind of a metaphor for what's happening all over this country. And what that is about is we have seen a city which once had thousands of excellent paying jobs lose those jobs because of disastrous trade policies. We have seen companies like Lucent Technologies, Dana Corporation, Ludens, Glidden, and Baldwin Hardware are just a few of the major corporations that shut down manufacturing plants in Reading and moved overseas, destroying thousands of decent-paying jobs. And what happens when good jobs leave, poverty increases, and what we have seen is since 1990, the poverty rate in Reading has more than doubled, going from 19% to 40%. Today, in the richest country in the history of the world, Reading and Allentown have two of the most financially troubled school districts in the entire nation. That is unacceptable. That has got to change. Now, way back when I first got elected to Congress in 1990, shortly after that, I was on the picket lines in opposition to NAFTA. Because I knew then that these trade agreements were written by corporate America for one sole purpose. And that was to make sure that companies did not have to pay workers in Pennsylvania or in Vermont a living wage. What they wanted to do and what they accomplished was to shut down tens of thousands of manufacturing plants all over this country, move to low-wage countries, and then bring their products back here in the United States of America. As a result of these trade agreements, we have lost millions of decent-paying jobs. That has got to end. We need a trade policy which protects the interest of the American worker, not just the CEOs of multinational corporations. We need a trade policy which creates decent-paying jobs in America, not just in China. And one of the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself is I have opposed every one of these disastrous trade agreements. She has supported virtually every one of these disastrous trade agreements. Now, what's going on in America, what's going on in Reading, what's going on coast to coast, is that for 35 years we have seen the middle class of this country decline. We now have 47 million people living in poverty, and we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country on earth, and it is worse today in America than at any time since 1928. Enough is enough. I see that we have some workers from the CWA here. Stand up, guys. Now, in the same sense that we have seen the loss of jobs here in Reading, these guys today are out on strike against Verizon. And I want you all to know that they are not only standing up and fighting for their own interests, they are fighting for every worker in America. Because Verizon is doing to them, or trying to do to them, what corporation after corporation has done to the American worker. In this case, they want to take away health care benefits that these workers have fought for and won. They want to outsource decent paying call center jobs to low wage countries. And meanwhile, while Verizon is trying to save money on the backs of their workers, they apparently have enough money to pay $18 million in compensation to the CEO of that corporation. And this is what goes on every damn day. Outsourcing of decent paying jobs, cutting wages, cutting benefits, and giving CEOs outrageously high compensation packages. This is a corporate culture which is destroying the middle class of this country, and if elected president, we will change that culture. Now, this campaign is doing well because we're doing something very radical. We're telling the truth. The truth is not always easy to hear, and sometimes it is painful. I wish that I did not have to tell you that Verizon was a greedy corporation that could care less about their workers, but that is the truth. And I wish I could tell you that we had an economy that was working for all of us, but that would be a lie, because we have an economy today that is ignoring the needs of the middle class and working families, while the people on top are doing phenomenally well. Here is what a rigged economy in our country means. It means that we have a grotesque level of income and wealth inequality, where the top 1% now earns almost as much wealth, has almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. You got that? 0.1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. An economy in which the wealthiest 20 people own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. An economy in which one family, the Walton family of Walmart, not only one family owns more money, more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people, but guess what? This family who owns Walmart, the largest private sector company in America, they pay their workers wages that are so low that many of their employees are forced to go on food stamps or Medicaid. And you know who pays for those food stamps and Medicaid? That's called a rigged economy, when the middle class has to subsidize the wealthiest family in this country because they refuse to pay their workers living wages. And I say to the Walton family, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. And when we talk about a rigged economy, it is not only a grotesquely unfair distribution of wealth, it is income as well. Now, what this campaign is about and what the political revolution is about is asking people to think outside of the box. Think outside of what the television and radio and newspapers tell you. Ask yourselves some hard questions. Here is a question. Why is it that despite an explosion of technology and an increase in worker productivity, why is it that most of our people today are working longer hours for lower wages? Simple question. Why is that? Why is it that in my state of Vermont and in Pennsylvania, we've got many people, they're not working one job, they're working 2 jobs or 3 jobs in order to cobble together the income and the health care that they need? Why is it, and young people will not believe me when I tell them this, check it out, Google it after the event, not now. And what you will find is something pretty remarkable. 40 or 50 years ago, in America, one breadwinner in a family, in those days often the man, one person could work 40 hours a week and earn enough money to take care of the whole family. Now, young people can't believe that. Because today, what do you got? You got mom out working, you got dad out working, you got the kids out working. But despite all of that hard work, and I hope you all know that we in America now work the longest hours of any people in the industrialized world. Japanese are very hard workers. We work longer hours than the people in Japan. But despite all of that hard work, listen to this, 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. So the first thing that we have got to do together, and it's not that hard, is to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the people on top. That's right. We're going to get to that one in a minute, because that's directly related to everything else. All right? What do? How do you create an economy that works for all people? First of all, you create jobs. That's kind of a no-brainer. Well, how do you create jobs? Number one, you transform our trade policy so that corporate America invests in this country, not in China. Number two, we raise the minimum wage to a living wage. And to my mind, a living wage is $15 an hour. Thirdly, we understand that it is not acceptable for women nationally to be making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. And we establish pay equity for women workers. Fourthly, we understand that in our country today, our infrastructure, that is our roads, our bridges, our water systems, our wastewater plants, our rail system, our airports, our levees, our dams, our schools, our housing stock, in many ways are crumbling. And that is why we need a massive jobs program to rebuild that crumbling infrastructure. $1 trillion investment creates 13 million decent-paying jobs. Now, I was in Flint, Michigan a couple of months ago, and what I saw in Flint, Michigan was literally beyond comprehension. It really made me, I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing and hearing was taking place in the United States of America in 2016, and that was children being poisoned through excessive lead in their water. But it is not just Flint, Michigan. It is communities all over this country, in Pennsylvania, in Vermont, all over this country, where people are becoming increasingly nervous about the water they are drinking and giving their kids. This is the United States of America. We should have clean drinking water. And another area where Secretary Clinton and I disagree is, I think, if we are going to have clean drinking water, we've got to end fracking. When we talk about what's going on in this country, the most important thing that we have got to do is to defy the establishment and think big, not small. Once you start thinking big, the world takes on a different perspective. For example, any psychologist in this room? Okay, there's one. What every psychologist who studies children will tell you is that the ages of 0 through 4 are the most important years of a human being's development, intellectually and emotionally. Is that right? Okay. If that is true, which everybody who studies the issue agrees it's true, why do we have a dysfunctional child care system in which parents cannot find decent quality child care for their kids? Who made that policy that says that child care workers will get paid in some cases less than McDonald's workers? Who determined that our kids are not worthy of the best quality pre-K education in the world? Who made the policies that our school systems have inadequate funding, teachers not getting paid what they deserve, school buildings crumbling, schools without the technology they need? Who made those decisions? And those who made it should leave office. Let us have the best educational system in the country. made the decision. Everybody here knows that today, in many respects, a college degree is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 40 or 50 years ago. Is that right? 40 or 50 years ago, in Reading or in Burlington, Vermont, you had a high school degree, you can go out and get a pretty good middle-class job. In many instances, that is not the case today. The world has changed, the economy has changed, technology has changed. People need more education. Well, if the economy has changed, our educational system has got to change as well. And that's why I believe that today, when we talk about public education, it's not good enough to talk about first grade through 12th grade. We have got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Think about it for a moment. Again, think outside of the box, not what the TV tells you what to think about. Is that a radical idea? Of course it is not a radical idea. When technology changes, education changes, people need more education. It is insane that we got hundreds of thousands of bright, qualified young people today who cannot afford to go to college. It is equally crazy that go out millions of people who leave school deeply in debt, $30,000, $50,000, $70,000 in debt. We should be rewarding people for getting the education they need, not punishing those people. How many people here today are dealing with student debt? Raise your hand. Whoa, look around you. Millions of people struggling with student debt, paying off that debt year after year, decade after decade. Frankly, that's nuts. That's nuts. People's future economic well-being should not be negatively impacted because they got the education they should get. Now, we have an idea. People think it's a radical idea. I don't think it's a radical idea. That says, number one, we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Number two, we're going to lower student debt by allowing people with that debt to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. Now, here is the issue which defines this campaign. People say, well, Bernie, you're a nice guy, giving away free tuition, lower student debt, very generous of you. How are you going to pay for all of this? And let me tell you exactly how we're going to pay for this. We have got to appreciate that over the last 35 years, there has been a massive transfer of wealth in this country from the pockets of the middle class to the top 1/10 of 1%, who have seen a doubling of the percentage of wealth they own. Got that? Redistribution of wealth, unfortunately, it's gone in the wrong direction, from the middle class to the people on top. I believe that as a result of the Wall Street crash of 2008, when the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior, underlined illegal behavior, of Wall Street nearly destroyed our economy, Congress, against my vote, bailed them out. That's what we did. Now, I think that today we should impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. Which would raise more than enough money to provide free tuition at public colleges and universities and lower student debt. When Wall Street nearly destroyed this economy, we bailed them out. Now it is their time to help the middle class of this country. Now, while I am on the subject of Wall Street, let me just give you an example of what a rigged economy is about and what wealth is about and what power is about in our society today. With relatively little publicity, it turns out that Goldman Sachs, one of the large financial institutions on Wall Street, paid a couple of weeks ago, reached a settlement with the United States government for $5 billion. $5 billion. Now, why did they reach that settlement? Well, as you know, they were selling worthless packages of subprime mortgage loans. They were running their company in a fraudulent manner, ripping off people and laying the groundwork for the financial collapse which impacted the lives of so many of our people. Goldman Sachs paid a $5 billion fine for their illegal behavior. Now, today, if some kid in Pennsylvania gets arrested for possession of marijuana, that young person will have a criminal record for the rest of his life. But if you are an executive on Wall Street whose illegal behavior cost the jobs of millions of Americans and the life savings of many others, do you know what happens to you? Well, that's not quite right. You get an increase in your compensation package. That has got to change, and we will bring justice back to a broken criminal justice system. Now, when I talk about the differences between Secretary Clinton and myself, one of the major differences is precisely how we raise money for our campaigns. Running for president is a very expensive proposition. We had to make a decision as to whether or not we would have a super PAC and raise money from the wealthy and the powerful. We concluded that we do not represent Wall Street, corporate America, or the billionaire class. We don't want their money. Right, you got it. They said it better than I did. But let me elaborate just a bit. We did not establish a super PAC, and we decided to do it the very old-fashioned way. We went to the American people and we said, listen, if you want to support a campaign which is going to stand up for you and your families, a campaign prepared to take on the big money interest, we need your help. And what has happened over the last 11 months, we have received in an unprecedented manner in American history over 7 million individual campaign contributions. Anyone know what that average contribution is? That's right, $27. How's that? Now, you know what is revolutionary about that? What's revolutionary is it shows that you can run a winning national campaign. We've won in now 17 states throughout this country. You can run a winning campaign without being dependent on big money interest. And that is profound, because at the end of the day, right now, what we are struggling with as a nation is a corrupt campaign finance system which allows billionaires and Wall Street and the big money interest to buy elections. And I'm proud that we have run a campaign without a super PAC and without their money. Now, Secretary Clinton has chosen to raise her money a different way, with several super PACs. And in the last reporting period, her super PAC acknowledged raising $25 million from special interests, including $15 million from Wall Street. In addition to that, as you know, Secretary Clinton has given speeches on Wall Street for $225,000 a speech. Not a bad day's work. Now, I kind of think if you're going to get $225,000 for a speech, it must be a brilliant, insightful, world-shattering speech, don't you think? It must be a speech that will probably solve all of the crises facing our planet and then some. And it was probably written in Shakespearean prose. And I think a speech of that extraordinary magnitude should be shared with the American people. Now, Secretary Clinton, she has said, well, she has said that she is prepared to make her transcripts available if other people will do the same. All right, you guys ready here in Reading? I'm going to make a dramatic announcement now. All right, you all ready? All right. This afternoon, I am announcing I am going to release all of the transcripts of all of the speeches that I have given on Wall Street. And in order to be absolutely transparent, I'm going to share those speeches with you. Are you ready? Here they are. You got it? No speeches, no transcripts, no $225,000 a speech. This campaign is going to win because we are listening to the American people, not just the wealthy campaign contributors. We are listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. You know what they are asking me? They're asking me, how does it happen that we have trillions of dollars to spend on a war in Iraq that we never should have gotten into in the first place? But apparently, we do not have the funding to rebuild crumbling inner cities in America. And you know what? They're absolutely right. Why is it that kids in inner cities America get asthma at far higher rates than children in the suburbs? Why is it that in inner city America people are paying 50 or 60% of their limited incomes because there is not enough affordable housing? Why is it that the poverty rate, the unemployment rate, the incarceration rate is so much higher than in other parts of this country? So our pledge is to change our national priorities. No more tax breaks for billionaires. No more wars that should not be fought. Let's invest in inner cities in America. Today in America, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth. We are spending $80 billion a year to lock up 2.2 million Americans. We have unemployment rates among young people of 30, 40, 50%. I believe that it makes a lot more sense to invest in our young people in jobs and education, not jails and incarceration. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the Latino community. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country. Many of them are being exploited because if you are a worker and you do not have any legal rights, your employer can and will cheat you. You will not get the minimum wage. You will not get what you are entitled to. And that is why I believe we need comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. And if the Congress does not do its job, I will use the executive powers of the presidency to do all that I can to protect the undocumented. Now, I also believe that when we talk about criminal justice, we have got to end corporate ownership of prisons and detention centers. And I also believe that it is time to shut down the Burks Family Detention Center. The government should not be in the painful and inhumane business of locking up families who have fled unspeakable violence in Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and other countries throughout the world. Instead, we should treat these families with the compassion, the dignity, and the respect they deserve. This campaign is listening to a group of people whose voice is almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. From day one, from before this country became a country, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and treaties they negotiated were broken. We owe the Native American people more of a debt of gratitude than we can ever repay. They have taught us a whole lot of things, especially that we as human beings are part of nature, that we have got to live with nature, and that our species does not survive if we destroy nature. That's an invaluable lesson that we can never, ever forget. And in that regard, I should tell you that I am a member of the U.S. Senate Committee on the Environment. In that regard, I have talked to scientists all over our country and all over the world. And what they have told me almost unanimously is that climate change is real. It is caused by human activity, and it is already causing devastating problems in our country and throughout the world. And this is what they are also telling us, and it is scary stuff. And for the sake of our children and future generations, we had better listen. And that is, if we do not get our act together and transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, in the years to come, there will be more drought, more floods, more extreme weather disturbances, more acidification and destruction of the oceans, more rising sea levels, more international conflict as people around the world fight over limited natural resources. This is a scary situation, and we have got to act and act boldly. And that means telling the fossil fuel industry that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of this planet. Now, when we think big and not small, certain questions arise. And one of the important questions that arises is, how does it happen that in our great country we are the only major nation on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right? All of Europe does it. Scandinavia does it. I live 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They have health care for all of their people, but somehow we are unable to do that. Now, I'm a member of the committee that helped write the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act has done a lot of good things, and I thank President Obama for his leadership on that issue. The Affordable Care Act has ended this obscenity called pre-existing conditions. 17 million more people now have health insurance. And we have ended price discrimination against women. But today, despite the gains of the ACA, 29 million people still have no health insurance. Many of you are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments. And everybody in this room is being ripped off by the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, who charge us the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. You want to hear crazy? Crazy is 1 out of 5 Americans who get a prescription from their doctor are unable to afford to fill that prescription. That's crazy. Crazy is elderly people in Pennsylvania and Vermont cutting their pills in half because they don't have enough money to buy the medicine they need. Meanwhile, on top of all of that, we end up spending far more per person on health care than do the people of any other country, and our health care outcomes are not necessarily better. In my view, the time is now to make certain that health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. Which to my mind means that we should establish a Medicare for all single-payer program. Everybody in this room knows one very important fact of American political life, and that is that change has never taken place from the top on down. It has always taken place from the bottom on up. That is the history of the workers' movement. 100 years ago, workers working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, fired arbitrarily, children working in factories, but working people came together and said, we will form trade unions to protect the needs of working people. 200 years ago, in the midst of the abomination of slavery, African Americans and their allies said that, you know what, we are going to make that day come when racism and segregation and bigotry will end in the United States of America. And how many of those heroes and heroines were killed, went to jail, were beaten, lost their jobs? We will never know. But change came about because people by the millions stood up and fought back. We forget. Today we forget. Kids don't know. 100 years ago today, women in America did not have the right to vote, did not have the right to get an education that they wanted, did not have the right to do the jobs they wanted less than 100 years ago. But women stood up along with their male allies, and they said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. If we were in this room 10 years ago, not a long time at all, somebody would have jumped up and say, you know, Bernie, I think that by the year 2015, gay marriage will be made legal in the United States and all 50 states. The person sitting next to that person would say, you're nuts, that can't happen. But it did happen because the gay community and their straight allies fought and made it happen. And that's, if we were here, I want you to think about this, 5 years ago, which is no time at all, somebody jumps up and says, Bernie, you know, the $7.25 an hour minimum wage is a starvation wage. We've got to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour. The person next to her would have said, $15 an hour? You want to more than double the minimum wage. You are nuts. You're thinking too big. You're too radical. Can't happen. But then workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, they went out on strike. They stood up. They fought back. And a few years ago, Seattle, Washington, $15 an hour. L.A., San Francisco, $15 an hour. Oregon, California, New York, $15 an hour. And if I have anything to say about it, there will be $15 an hour in every state in this country. But here is the point. The point is that the status quo can change if people are prepared to stand up and fight for change. If all we do is moan and groan, ain't it terrible, ain't it awful, but we don't get involved, that change will never come about. And what this campaign is about is, in fact, bringing millions of middle-class and working families together, young people who in many cases have never participated in the political process, getting them involved, standing up and fighting to create a government which represents all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. Brothers and sisters, on Tuesday, there will be a very, very important primary here in Pennsylvania. What we have learned in this campaign is when the voter turnout is high, we win. When it's low, we lose. Let us have next Tuesday the highest voter turnout in Pennsylvania history. Thank you all very much.